We've now seen how various mythologies and cultural traditions came together to influence the portrayal of Wood Elves in The Lord of the Rings and other older works of fiction, which themselves influenced Warhammer's ASRAI. Let's now take a look at how a few more contemporary franchises' depictions of Wood Elves measure up. We will be examining Warcraft, The Elder Scrolls, and Dragon Age. Warcraft's version of Wood Elves are called Night Elves. Like in Warhammer, they are considered savage by other races and have tribalistic tendencies, including living amongst the forest and a reverence bordering worship of its various aspects. One big difference separating Warcraft's Kaldera'i from Warhammer's ASRAI is the nocturnal nature of the former. Night Elves are more active when the sun goes down. Worshippers of the Night Elf moon goddess Elune will see their magic increase in potency under the light of a shining moon. Additionally, depending on your interpretation of the lore, the Night Elves have an ability called Shadow Meld that allows them to turn invisible at night whilst immobile. While certain areas of Athel Loren are eternally trapped in twilight, they gain no such benefits from being nocturnal. Another interesting fact is that Night Elves are evolved from a nocturnal variety of trolls, so-called dark trolls. The extent of the relationship, however, between the ASRAI and Warhammer's trolls goes no further than a viscerally disgusted wood elf wondering how many arrows will it take before the unclean beast dies. Rather than having to claim what they consider such a foul ancestry, ASRAI are more or less just geographically and temporally separated high elves. In Warhammer, the Sundering is the name given to the civil war between the Dark Elves and the High Elves and the resulting splintering off of sections of the island of Ulthuan. In Warcraft, the Sundering refers to the collapse of a portal which was being used to summon demons during the War of the Ancients. The explosion from this collapse was so large it obliterated 80% of the continent and created a massive perpetual whirlpool in the waters beneath its epicenter. In Athel Loren, the Oak of Ages is as ancient as the forest itself, if not more, and as far as we know, its roots stretch across the entire planet, and the ASRAI utilize these roots for teleportation. In Ashenvale, Nordrassil was planted to contain the power of a second well of eternity, granting the Kaldera'i immortality. In contrast, the ASRAI have immortality as an innate gift. Now that Nordrassil is destroyed, the Night Elves are beginning to feel the pain of mortality. The dream world parallel to Athel Loren, called Athel Kalen, is extremely dangerous and demon-infested by nature, and the Wood Elves only access this realm as a last resort to gain insight into otherwise unknowable subjects. The Emerald Dream, in comparison, is a more peaceful plane. It also exists parallel to the entirety of the planet Azeroth, rather than just one forest like Athel Loren. The Night Elves willingly enter this realm as part of a pact with the dragon Ysera, as dreamers are needed to maintain the balance of nature on the material plane. Both Night Elves and Wood Elves worship nature gods with strong stag motifs, and both of these gods walk the material plane. For the Kaldorai, he is Cenarius, and for the ASRAI, Orion. Like the ASRAI, Night Elves' armies are bolstered by spirits of the forests. Trents are walking trees that eventually grow into bigger, more powerful entities known as ancients, unlike the treemen in Warhammer, who are simply tended to by their smaller dryad kin, rather than being matured versions of them. And in Warcraft, dryads are peaceably dispositioned, nature-loving deer centaurs spawned from magical acorns, instead of the spiteful bark creatures we see in Warhammer. Both Wood Elves and Night Elves have dragon allies. The dragons aligned with the Night Elves are called the Green Dragonflight. While they are usually fast asleep within the Emerald Dream, the Dragonflight will usually awaken when Azeroth is under threat, for their souls are bound to nature just as the forest dragons in Warhammer, similar to how forest dragons breathe soporific gas instead of fire for the sake of not burning their own homes to the ground. The Green Dragonflight's breath are also nature-aligned, but can come in more varieties than that of forest dragons, whether it be corrosive acid, noxious gas, or emerald-colored flame that does not burn trees. The Bosmer of the Elder Scrolls have a few similarities to the ASRAI as well. They both obviously live in massive forests, for one, and both have trees large enough to build cities upon. But the Bosmer have a leg up in this regard. The largest trees in Valenwood are migrational, meaning that there are not only settlements built in the trees, but mobile ones due to the non-sedentary nature of the bark they rest upon. The sentient nature of Athel Loren is actually closer to the environment of another region of Tamriel known as the Black Marsh, which is home to the lizardmen-like Argonians, rather than the wood elf-like Bosmer. Here grow sentient trees known as Hiss, which once grew anywhere there was soil on the planet of Nirn, but are now mostly confined to the boundaries of the Black Marsh, similar to how Athel Loren once covered much of the old world and is now relegated to a small section of southeastern Bretonia. While it is not known exactly how old Athel Loren is, we do know the forest was created by the Old Ones, meaning it is among the most ancient entities in Warhammer. This is reminiscent of how old the histories of the Black Marsh are. Hists and Elnofe, the latter of which are the descendants of the gods and semi-divine ancestors of all modern races, were the first two living entities in the realm of Mundus. The Hists were witness to the great war that took place between the various factions of Elnofe during that time. This conflict threw into the sea much of the land where Hists had taken root, and thus many trees are said to have fled to oblivion to escape the cataclysm. Here they found a new home in their own pocket dimension, a realm where glowing whippoorwills wander amongst everlasting forests that stretch as far as mortal eyes can see. The majority of Hists who remained made their home in the Black Marsh, though some isolated trees remain throughout Nirn. These ancient sentient trees and the swamps they inhabit have many abilities and properties atypical to most other flora of Tamriel. Red bioluminescent flowers grow from the branches of most breeds, while other rarer strains are known to blossom blue flowers or even icicles. Like the Oak of Ages, hist roots grow wide across continents and burrow deep into the heart of the planet. The hists use these roots to hold the swamps of the Black Marsh together and are able to shape it to their collective will. Similar to Athel Loren, even the most learned survivalists and navigators wind up traveling in circles due to history's shifting the paths to deter intruders. All hists are connected by roots to each other and frequently communicate amongst themselves. So strong are these connections that hists from the Black Marsh were able to call upon hists far across the oceans on the floating island of Umbriel, which had been ripped from the pocket dimension many hists fled to during the War of the El Nefeh long ago. A spore is said to have fallen from this island during the journey, growing into one of the few hists outside of the Black Marsh, known as the Sleeping Tree of Skyrim. Hiss can also communicate with Argonians through hallucinations and dreams induced from the sap they secrete. Many times throughout history have the Hists warned the Argonians of Black Marsh of threats to their land. The trees foretold of the Oblivion Crisis, and as a result, Argonians from all over Tamriel returned to Black Marsh, and together with the Argonians already living there, bolstered their defenses and successfully fought off the invading Daedra. Factions within the Black Marsh even marshaled forces to charge through the Oblivion Gates in raids that were devastating for the Daedra within. Hist sap is also used as a nursing fluid for baby Argonians, and it is believed Argonians form their soul in this manner. When Argonians die, their memories meld back into the consciousness of the Hist network. Sap from the roots of Hist is called deep sap. It is a more potent version of the substance, and through certain rituals, Argonians who have ingested deep sap can manifest things seen in their visions into the real world. Not unlike the immune system of the human body, cannibalizing cells that have become harmful, Hists will isolate and destroy one of their own if the tree should prove harmful to the group. Such was the case for the Hist tree that summoned the zombie island of Umbriel. As far as the Wild Hunt is concerned, both Bosmer and Wood Elves from Warhammer have some version of it, but the Bosmer's is more of a transformation than a hunt. It is a mysterious power from the times when Tamriel was as chaotic as the Chaos Realms in Warhammer have always been. The Wild Hunt changes an individual Bosmer into a rampaging swarm of otherworldly beasts and vermin, tinged with aspects of plants and trees, even transforming mundane animals that wander too closely. It tears apart and devours everything in its path, and when no targets remain, the insane pack of god-faced animals, serpent heaps, and carnivorous insect colonies turn on each other, consuming all. Many of the most dangerous monsters in the Elder Scrolls are said to have been products of the Wild Hunts in the past. The wild hunt of the Wood Elves is less dramatic. Every time Orion is reborn, he will blow his horn to signal the beginning of an actual hunt, where the consort king essentially picks a direction, and the Wood Elves follow him down that path, murdering all they can along the way. It is simply a means for the ASRAI and forest spirits to release some of the pent-up energy that builds up during the winter months. The closest thing Elder Scrolls has to Warhammer's Wild Hunt is the Blood Moon Prophecy. Each millennium, Hircine, the Daedric Prince of Hunting, will enter the realm of Mundus seeking worthy prey accompanied by his hounds, which are typically werewolves rather than mere dogs. Not only is Hircine's domain the hunt like Orion, but both of the demigods' depictions are inspired by the IRL god Cernunnos. They share the Celtic god's stag-like appearance and canine associations. Werewolves, wereboars, werebears, werelions, and werecrocodiles all worship Hircine, as well as hunters, trappers, and fishermen. In Warhammer, werebeasts are creatures spawned of chaos corruption, something unrelated to Orion or Kurnos. The Wood Elves in Warhammer treat the forest with great respect and use no more flora and fauna than what is required for shelter, food, and armaments. The Bosmer take this one step further in their respect for Valenwood. They follow the theocratic decree of the Green Pact, which states that no plants may be eaten or harmed. This means most Bosmer are entirely carnivorous, except for those few they call salad eaters. In more ancient traditions, Bosmer were also required to eat the corpses of their enemies within 3 days of them being slain. Yes, indeed. Some of these cannibals will even file their teeth to better tear flesh from bone. This custom has fallen out of practice for obvious reasons, but is still observed in some areas of Valenwood amongst more isolated and savage Bosmer. Both the Wood Elves and the Bosmer do not cut down trees for shelter, but instead shape trees into homes through various magics. For the Wood Elves, this extends to any outsiders, and any poor fools caught collecting firewood by the axe are shot dead. But the Bosmer do not mind other races cutting down trees in their home under certain regulations, and in fact are known to sell timber from Valenwood, which coincides with their general friendliness towards outsiders. The Bosmer value diversity and are thus way more welcoming to visitors than the Wood Elves, regarding whom one might flip a coin on to determine whether or not you'll survive the encounter. As is the case in the Silmarillion, Warcraft, and Warhammer, the Elder Scrolls has its own version of the Sundering, though in this case it is most similar to the Silmarillion, simply describing the migrational patterns and the fracturing among cultural and racial lines of the Aldmer, so-called the Sundering of Aldmeris. The Elnafe of Tamriel became the Dwemer, meaning deep ones, the Chimer, meaning changed ones, the Bosmer, meaning green or forest ones, the Falmer, meaning snow ones, the Maomor, meaning sea or tropical ones, and the Altmer, meaning elder or high ones. The Wanderers became the men of Nirn, eventually splitting off into many different racial groups, including the Bretons, the Imperials, the Needs, the Nords, the Red Guards of Yakuta, and possibly the Saichi of Akavir, and other aboriginal groups. Lastly, and indeed the least, in my opinion, are the Dalish. Unlike the other races, the Dalish are Wood Elves, partially because the alternative is death, discrimination, servitude, or some combination of all of the above. Not necessarily because they are in love or in tune with nature. Due to various conflicts and rampant racism towards elves, the Dalish are completely nomadic, and oftentimes the safest locations for their caravans to set up camp happen to be forested areas. Like the Night Elves, the Dalish have lost their immortality, but in this case it seems to be due to contact with humans. In Warhammer, the elves certainly played a part in the realms of chaos, bursting forth millions of demons in what is known as the Coming of Chaos. Elves experience sensations to a greater degree than other races with duller senses. Slaanesh feeds on these feelings and emotions, and was thus greatly glutted and empowered once elven civilization reached its peak, and decadence was the norm. Slaanesh was thus able to more easily help tear open the warp gates, along with her brothers Khorne, Nurgle, and Tzeentch. In Dragon Age, the material world and the spiritual one, the latter of which is known as the Fade, were once merged together. There was an elven mage who, for reasons of vengeance we will not explore further here, separated the Fade from our world. The spirits and magical aspects of the Fade are heavily influenced by perception. When these spirits and otherworldly energies became isolated from the senses of living beings of flesh and blood, these perceptions grew negative. Consequently, the aura of the Fade and the disposition of the spirits that lived there also grew to be negative to the point of becoming demons, and the Fade a living hell. Thus are the elves, and by extension the Dalish, directly responsible for the Fade being as dangerous as it is, and the proliferation of demons.